Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I am a professional practice and policy fellow with the South Carolina Education Association and the NEA, and I'm a proud member of both organizations. And they have been so supportive in the work that we've been doing this year to bring you these webinars for free for all public educators in South Carolina. And we hope that you have been enjoying this series of webinars that we've put together for you. Tonight is a very special one. A friend of mine is joining us. Her name is Techa Smalls-Brown, and Techa embodies presence and authenticity with her life and work. She's been an educator for 24 years for the Charleston County School District, using her gifts to add beauty wherever she goes. She's taught exceptional children African-American studies at the secondary level and elementary Montessori as a teacher. She's also endorsed as a gifted and talented teacher and is an alumni of the Omega Institute's Transformative Educational Leadership Program, or TEL. She's a TEL fellow and leads a teacher wellness circle with Millennium Forum. As a result of the work, she is equipped to integrate mindfulness-based social emotional techniques for students and staff and focus on equity and ethical learning in school systems. She's the co-host of Namas Teach, a podcast that she co-created with Jennifer Savage, a space for educators to heal and connect. Techa is really a true visionary. She holds a master's degree in curriculum and instruction with a focus on trauma and resilience in educational settings from Concordia University. Currently, she's a PhD student at Antioch University in the Graduate School of Leadership and Change. She just seeks to transform lives of students and educators across the country, teaching them about the impacts of trauma, the power of resilience, the importance of self-care, and ways teachers can support students' social, emotional, and academic development. She's also the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission for Charleston County. She was a guest on the Galliard Center Raising the Volume series, season 2. She's also a meditation teacher with Still Soul Studio in Charleston and led meditations for Roper St. Francis Healthcare, MUSC, and global tech companies. She's the coordinator of the Black Educator Collective with the E3 Foundation, and she's married to her soulmate, Michael J. Brown, who's been a part of her life for over 23 years. And all of that is, if that doesn't impress you, let me just say, I met Techa a few years ago. We held a retreat up in Old Fort, North Carolina. We're doing that again this June. And we got to know each other, and she's just bright, brilliant, sweet, and smart, and just an amazing human being. And I'm so thrilled that she agreed to share some of her wisdom and insights with us tonight. So how are you doing tonight? First of all, Techa, you doing okay?
Yes, I'm well, Todd. Thank you. That introduction was quite the introduction. When I hear those introductions, I always ask myself, is that me? But I'm honored, and thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. It's an honor to have you. And I'm going to be quiet now, and I'm just turning it over to you. And you take it away, and I'm just going to sit back and learn.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen with everyone here. Hold on a second. Okay, here we go. Okay, everybody, Todd gave me a great introduction, and this is the first slide of the presentation tonight. I'm going to talk, we're just going to have a conversation, and we're just going to talk about the inner work of the teacher. And I won't read my bio again. Todd did such an amazing job doing that, but just a little bit about me here, so you can see that on the slide. Hold on, I'm trying to advance it. Okay, here we go. Here's a little bit more, and if you wanted to know a little bit more about what some of the organizations that Todd talked about, Millennium Forum is something that I just started doing this year through the Omega Institute. It's around teacher wellness and just creating a safe space for teachers to heal. And I'm so such a proponent of teacher wellness and mindfulness and meditation. And know that these tools that we can access are ways that we could reach our students and learn more about who we are. So I grew up in New Jersey. I'm a native of South Carolina. And as Todd said, I've been a teacher for over 24 years with Charleston County. Most of my teaching career has been spent in Title I schools, taught African American studies, and just Montessori. All the work that I've done over the years, my career has led me to where I am now. And in the next phase of my career, I plan to work in all facets of education to create spaces for human flourishing through implementing adult SEL, resilience, mindfulness, wellness programs, all the things that help bring us together, help us heal, and help us learn more about who we are. Okay, so this is our first slide, the inner work of the teacher. So you may be asking yourself, what in the world is the inner work? And you see the word inner. So it has something to do with self. So before we start the inner work, we have to ask ourselves a series of questions. And some of these questions may be questions that we asked ourselves when we first started teaching, started our careers in education, or what brought us to education. These questions were ones that we probably didn't have answers to when we first started. And as we go through our career, we have to continue to ask ourselves these questions, like, what is my purpose? And most of the questions that you see, the what questions and the how questions, they have to do with our practice and our subject matter and our work with students. But I would like to say, if we take a closer look at the questions, the ones that stand out to me as the most salient questions are the what questions. What is my purpose? And what are my goals? And what impact do I want to have on the lives of my students? So just looking at the what are my goals questions, we always, set goals for ourselves. Goal setting is a part of what it means to be a teacher, places we want to go and accomplish with our students. But I want us just to take a look for this time that we have together to look at our personal goals, goals that we set for ourselves personally. And we know that our goals can evolve and change over time. And just as we evolve and change, so our goals change, and we always have to reflect back and revisit our goals. Okay, so the next slide. The next slide says, imbue yourself with the power of imagination. And imbue is a word that we may not use as part of our daily lexicon or how we speak, but I like this term. When I came across it, I was like, it really holds a lot of meaning for me. And to imbue just means to inspire or permeate with a feeling or a quality. And when we think of permeating something, we think of like filling ourselves up with it, or every part of ourselves. So the inner work of the teacher, we have to imbue ourselves with the power of imagination. We have to have the courage for truth, sharpen our feelings for responsibility of the person we are within. So just take a moment and look at this slide and just see what words stand out for you. What words resonate with you? Is it the word imbue itself and just what it means to inspire or permeate with a feeling or a quality, or the word power or imagination? I know for me, I see the word courage, and we're going to talk about courage a little bit later in the presentation, but truth may also be a word that stands out for you, or responsibility. And the person that you are within. Throughout our inner work as a teacher and the work that we do, we always have to look back and look within. And throughout this webinar tonight, we're going to hopefully have time to do that and reflect and just think about what that really means for us. And it might mean different things, but I just want to impart a little bit of what has worked for me throughout my career and how I do the inner work of being an educator. Here's the next slide. Okay, so the inner work of the teacher, if you look at this slide here, this is a graphic that I found. I love this graphic because it's so simple, but it shows like the weather, if you can see the different conditions of weather. And if we want to equate our daily work and our lives and what we do to the weather, we didn't know we were, weather people. And we look at this and we see the sun and we see the clouds and we see a clear sky, or we may see a blue sky with clouds, or even a chance of rain. So when you look at this slide, how would you describe how you've been feeling as a type of weather, or internal weather? And it's one that changes throughout our day. And with this inner work of being a teacher, we have to always assess that inner weather, and look at what the underlying reasons are for why we're feeling a certain way, or certain emotions that arise throughout our day. As teachers and educators, we are remarkable human beings. And I know that the calling of education is not for everyone, but education is something that we chose, or something that chose us. And it takes a lot to come to education with an open heart. And it takes a lot also just to do this inner work. So if we look at it, how would we describe our inner work? Or just think about how you felt today, if you were in the classroom or interacting with students and staff and family. How was your weather? It's always interesting. Now, this slide here, we're looking at emotions. This is an emotion map. This is one that I use often in my work with Millennium Forum. And part of our inner work as educators requires us to be aware of our emotional state. And we know that our emotional state can change, and our emotions are also what makes us human. And when I think about my emotions, I like to think that emotions are also something that causes us to pause, or to assess like our mental state, or where we are, or even just to serve as a signal that something may not be right, or we may need to pay attention to something. And we know that throughout our day, we may experience a range of emotions. When we acknowledge what we're really feeling, we can really look at what's underneath the emotions. And when I say what we're really feeling, we know. People ask us, how are you doing? We say, oh, I'm fine, or I'm good. When we know that our internal weather doesn't reflect that. So just take a look at this emotions map and see the overarching emotions, like happy, mad, sad, scared, surprise, or disgust, and see the different emotional states that are embedded in those feelings. Like, if you're happy, are you also hopeful, or is gratitude sparking that feeling of happiness? Or if you're sad, or do you feel lonely or let down or melancholy? So a part of our inner work is for us to be honest with our emotions and not try to shy away from how we're feeling. Not saying that you got to spill your guts out to everyone that you see or that asks you how you're doing, but just to be honest with yourself. It's part of our inner work to look at our emotions. So the inner work of educators. There's so many practices that we do to fill our supply. And I think of the word reservoir, and a reservoir being a supply or a source of something. Each of us, this is a beautiful poem by Judy Brown, and she says, each of us needs a reservoir within because life doesn't happen on an average. It has hurricanes and droughts and lovely days, and also joy. So also despair. So our reservoir is that supply or that source of something. So I just want you to take a minute and ask yourself, just assess, is your reservoir full? Is it half full? Or is it empty? Part of this inner work, we're always looking within to see how full that reservoir is. And are we taking active and intentional steps to fill our reservoir? So if we get empty, we know, we've seen that graphic, we can't draw from an empty cup. You can't pour from an empty cup, or if your cup is empty, you can't give to anyone, not even yourself. So thinking about the inner work is going to bring us to the place where we think about that reservoir within. So continuing with the inner work is going to continue to require us to ask these questions. These questions are going to come up a lot throughout this webinar. The question. So if you have a notebook or a journal or something, I encourage you just to write down, some of these questions, and you don't have to answer them now or, journal about them now, but maybe just later on or when you have some time or some space, you can try to answer these questions. We need to ask ourselves the who and the how questions. Part of the inner work is looking at our identity or our intersectionality. So how does the person I am, with my special circumstances, my background, my particular values, my prides, and cause for discomfort influence my teaching? Things that cause us discomfort also are a part of our identity because we feel strongly, we may have, some emotional value attached to them. And we need to just ask ourselves, like, who we are and what does that mean and how does that influence what we do for our students and what we bring to our schools and our classroom, how we interact with our students. Those questions, we always have to revisit the questions. And looking at our background, some of our backgrounds may influence who we are now or may not have influenced who we are now, and how that changed over time. Those are all questions that we have to continually assess in this inner work. So the inner work of the teacher requires us to assess our personal qualities, our relationships, and our interactions, going back to that. And this is another how question. How do my personal qualities influence my relationships toward my teaching practice, the students I teach, and everyone that we encounter? We know these personal qualities influence us in many ways, and who we are. I like to say, when we do this inner work, we bring our full selves to our work, the fullness of who we are, with our flaws and everything. That's what makes us human. That's what makes our students see us as human, all the ups and the downs, the highs and the lows. We bring all that with us every day. And one way that we do this inner work is by building relationships with our feelings, our emotions, the qualities. The relationships we build are so important to this inner work, and showing up for those relationships in authentic ways is a big part of the inner work. And it takes time. It's not something that you automatically come to. And what I found in doing this inner work, it's a part of life. It's every day for me. It's a practice, it's something that I do, something I pay attention to, it's awareness. It could be it could be a lot of things for a lot of people. And it's just something that we have to continually work at and continually do in order to grow ourselves and in our practice and what we do. So this part of the presentation is very special for me. It's we're looking at the work of Parker J. Palmer. He is one of the most beautiful teachers in this work of having teachers look at their internal landscape or their inner landscape, their inner life. You know, I came to the work of Parker Palmer by one of my mentors, Linda Lancieri, with the Omega Tudes Transformative Educational Leadership Program. We talked about that in the beginning. And some of you may be familiar with Parker Palmer's work. The Center for Courage and Renewal, which is located in Greenville, South Carolina, is centered around his work. And later on throughout the presentation, I have a lot of his beautiful quotes that we can ponder and just look at and think about as we explore our inner landscape and our inner work as teachers. So I like to say also that the inner work brings us to the place where we can be courageous and courageous enough to teach. Teaching does take courage, and this book is one that I highly recommend. If you haven't read it or know about it, go out and get it, because Parker Palmer imparts so much good wisdom and knowledge for us that we can take with us and just make us better people and primarily better educators. And he says that good teaching cannot be reduced to technique. Good teaching comes from the identity and the integrity of the teacher, that core of self where intellect, emotion, and spirit converge. And Parker Palmer also looks at teaching as a spiritual practice. And so do I, because the work that we do in the world has to be aligned with who we are internally. And it's part of our spiritual practice too. And a lot of times we don't think about spirituality in the classroom, but the inner work causes us to look at those deeper parts of ourselves and who we are. The inner work and the courage to teach also helps us not to lose heart in the work that we do, because it's been a rough time and a rough year these past couple years, almost going on 3 years. We're still here, but we still keep showing up and we still bring that courage with us every day in our classrooms. So this is a quote, one of our first quote slide that I just love, and it's great to have these slides up. I do something in my classroom where I have like on my Promethean board, I change it daily and I just have beautiful slides and images and messages for my students, myself, and anyone who enters the room. They can just see, you know, a slide presentation or a slideshow, and you change it throughout the day. But I really love this one. It really sets a tone and a culture too in your classroom. It says, good teachers join self and subject and students in the fabric of life. So if you think about the work we do as being like a beautiful quilt where we bring all these pieces of fabric together, the self and the subject and the students is where these all converge and they all meet in this beautiful fabric of life. So at the center of this quote for me, I see the word self. And the self is where it all starts. It starts with us knowing who we are. And then we're able to bring that knowledge of ourselves to the subject, the passion we bring in the classroom, the fabric of our lives as educators, the presence that we have in our schools. The self informs every aspect of our work and what we do for students. So knowing the self and the role that it plays, the self and working on the self, this is the work. This is the work before the work. Okay, going back a little bit, hold on. Okay, here we are at this slide, this word, holding space. Doing the inner work that we must do as educators allows us to hold space. Now let's just pause for a second. We hear this term a lot. We've been hearing this term a lot lately, and I think it's beautiful that, this is a part of our vernacular now as we look at the inner work of teachers, our emotional health, our emotional intelligence, our mental well-being, and how we hold space and what that really means. So we're going to unpack this for a little. This inner work does allow us to hold space so that others can discover their truth. So, like I said, these words, holding space, is heard a lot in relational conversations these days. The concept has always been prevalent in our relationships, so we haven't really given it a title or given it a name. So, holding space, we say, what does that really mean? So, we can define it as being physically, mentally, and emotionally present for someone. It means putting your focus on someone to support them as they feel their feelings, all the feelings and all the emotions. An important aspect of holding space is managing our judgment. So I like to think about holding space for others as being mindful for others or with others in our relationships with others. We are all familiar with the term mindfulness, and the definition of mindfulness is having an awareness of the present moment without judgment. And we bring that awareness to our thoughts and what we do, our actions, our words, just being mindful, thinking about it without judging. But when we hold space, it's also a form of mindfulness. We hold space for others so that they can discover their truth and who they are. So being mindful and holding space is to be empathetic. And we hear the word empathy thrown around a lot, being empathetic to another person's situation or circumstances, and just making time for that person, whatever it is, whatever they may need. They may need to voice hurt, they may need to voice their anger or another strong emotion. And when we hold space for them, we just support them without judgment. And when we do that, we also strengthen our inner work. And you may not think that these go together, but our relational practices are also a deep part of this inner work. So, holding space as we move through our stressful days, we may become preoccupied with our thoughts and worries and others' worries and the things that may be challenging to them. That's why this practice of holding space is so important. And it helps us to nurture each other and our relationships. Holding space, physically present. Just take a moment to just read the words here and the definition of holding space. The managing judgment is a huge part of it, because a lot of times when we interact with others, we want to give advice or tell them what they should do or what we think they should do. But when we hold space for them, we're simply just being with them and in that moment and giving them a open heart and really listening deeply and being intentional about being present with them in that moment. The practice of holding space requires these 8 things I came up with or pulled out when I was doing my research about what it means to hold space. And some of us may be familiar with the practice of loving kindness. Loving kindness is rooted in different spiritual traditions, and it describes the reverent practice of present moment cultivation of the present for one another and living and being with the earth and the self in that moment, just practicing loving kindness. You may have heard loving kindness practices. May you be well, may you be happy, may you have ease, may you know peace. I use that a lot in my meditation practices, the practice of loving kindness. It's one that really connects us to deeper parts of ourselves, but also helps us to love and be open to others. Holding space also requires deep listening and using deep listening, having unconditional positive regard. This practice rests on the knowledge that no matter what a person has done, the listener holds them with deep respect and compassion, regardless of the situation. So that unconditional positive regard is so important. Number 4 says, sit with what is. Just allow it to be. Just sit with what is, not trying to change anything or fix anything, but just allowing what is. And number 5 is allow. Allow the other person to feel whatever they're feeling and hold them in high regard, unconditional regard, hold them close to our hearts. If they need to cry, if they need to, whatever they need. When we hold space for them, we just let the person take what they need. Holding space also requires us to breathe, and breathing is something that we do automatically. It's part of our autonomic nervous system. It's a process that we do without even thinking, but sometimes throughout the day we might forget to breathe, and we may have to be reminded to breathe. Or when we get upset or we see others upset, holding space for them may just be telling them, just breathe, just take a breath. Holding space also requires us to be grounded and to help others to ground just by being there and being present with ourselves. So in order to do any of the things listed above, we have to be willing to be present with ourselves. So if it's hard, allow another person to help hold space for you. This inner work is not something that we do in a silo or by ourselves. The inner work is a relational work and practice, and it requires us to be with others as we are with ourselves. So now I like to guide us into, hold on these slides, a practice, sorry about that, into a practice where we're going to practice holding space. So I know I've given you a lot of information in this first half hour of the webinar, but we're almost at the halfway point, and it's good to just take a pause and just stop for a moment and feel what it means to hold space. So you can just get yourselves comfortable. Hopefully you're already comfortable as you're listening to my words here and reflecting and writing notes and just reflecting on everything you've heard. But right now, I just want you to join me in the short practice for holding space. So you can sit up straight. Just make sure that your spine is straight and not too rigid. Gently close your eyes if it feels comfortable for you. If it doesn't, just soften your gaze. And let's just take a few deep breaths here. Just inhaling, exhaling. As we practice holding space and going deeper in what it means to hold space and feeling that, let's just make sure also that your feet are firmly planted on the ground beneath you. You may want to take your shoes off or just feel your feet on the floor beneath you. And just take some breaths here. Take some breaths here and just allow the words holding space or hold space just to wash over you with each breath. And as you breathe, just feel yourself a little bit more relaxed. And just notice how you're feeling. When you decided to come to this webinar to learn about the inner work, how did you approach it? Were you open? Were you curious, eager to learn? Let's just think about it for a moment and continue to breathe here and feel into your body. The areas that may be tight, the areas that may feel a little bit tense. With each inhale and exhale, just allow any feelings of tension or tightness just to melt away and dissolve. Continue to breathe in and breathe out. And if it helps you to concentrate more, some of us may be seasoned meditators or experienced. Some of you may be new to the practice. It's okay. Wherever you are, it's fine. Just be here now. And if it helps you, you may just want to concentrate mentally, noting the breath as it enters, as you inhale through the nose and watch it exhale and just float out as you let go. Part of the inner work that we do is going to require us to spend time with ourselves and tapping into our breath. But I just felt that this would be a beautiful time for us to practice together and think about holding space. Holding space for each other and holding space for our students and our beautiful families and our colleagues, because we're all in this together. Continue to breathe. Now soften your focus here about what it really means to hold space and how we can be empathetic to others by allowing them to express their emotions without judgment and being as supportive as we can with those we encounter our loved ones, our students, our family, our friends, we can hold space for them. We're not trying to fix them or to give them advice or tell them what to do. Sometimes people just need that space to be held, to be truly heard and listened to, free from distraction, those things that take us away from being fully present. When we're non judgmental and fully present, it allows others to safely explore their emotions and trust their intuitive wisdom. By creating a compassionate space, we allow others to voyage down their own path of healing or resolution at their own pace. So the next time someone close to you or a student or a colleague is experiencing a challenge, simply hold space for them. Let's just take a deep breath in. Let it go. And as we come to the end of our holding space practice, let's just bring ourselves back to the room, bring ourselves back to hearing the sounds around us, being aware of where we are. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And that did not take long at all. It was just a few moments where we sat together, connecting to our breath and deepening what it means to hold space. I hope you enjoyed that practice. This brings us to a quote that I like to return to all the time when I look at the inner work of the teacher. The inner work of the teacher requires us to go within. We have to go within every day. So if it takes us doing a practice like that every day or just sitting with ourselves every day, whatever it is, we have to go within every day. And we have to find that inner strength so that the world will not blow out our candle. Because the world will blow out our candle if we don't strengthen ourselves each and every day with our inner work. So important. So we never stop asking ourselves the questions. The inner work requires us to continue to question. Asking questions and reflecting is an ongoing process. Questions and curiosity go hand in hand. So as you do your inner work, what questions are you asking yourself? The inner work of the teacher, teaching's great purpose is to help the next generation find the spirit of mutual care and concern while supporting each student's distinctive way of being in the world. As teachers, we bring our calling to our life by supporting one another, by engaging in philosophical inquiry and self-cultivation. So I'd like to let us just take a minute to look at these questions. If you want to take a shot of the screen, you can. And return to these questions later, asking ourselves, have I lost my purpose to teach? Am I making a difference? Does teaching light me up from within? Did I choose to teach or did teaching choose me? What attracted me to the teaching profession? What is good teaching? And is teaching a spiritual calling? We talked about that earlier. Is it a spiritual calling for you? This is a beautiful quote that I like to read by Maya Angelou. She says, "We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty. The inner work takes a metamorphosis of sorts. We are ever changing, and looking at that inner landscape requires us to be just like the butterfly going through those changes and noticing the beauty at the end. This brings us now to this next slide. I like to think about professional development as personal growth. So asking ourselves questions again, what are our areas for personal growth? The inner work requires us to grow personally. When was the last time we attended a conference? Virtually, we've been doing a lot of things in the virtual world. Now things are starting to open up in person, and we may be privileged to go in person to conferences now. So what type of conferences would we want to go to that would help us cultivate and foster this inner work? What matters most to my personal growth? Where can I seek resources for personal growth? And can I just take a 2 or 3 day personal retreat to sustain myself while doing this work to transform others? And also, does my school encourage personal growth for teachers? Because we know that it's needed. We all need it. Curiosity is being eager to know and learn something. So we approach this inner work with curiosity, always curious, always wanting to know, what about this? Thinking about our habits, our biases, even our negative self-talk. And we know that a life without curiosity is by definition a stagnant life. So the good news about being curious, it's easy and it doesn't happen by accident. It's something that we have to deliberately do. There's so much power in curiosity. Take a minute just to look at this beautiful slide. I love this slide. Just being curious is essential to our growth in life. A little curiosity shapes our thinking in new ways, changing our beliefs and behaviors for the better. Part of this inner work is being curious. Another quote by Parker Palmer: as I teach, I project the condition of my soul onto my students, my subject, and our way of being together. So this brings us now to this part of the slideshow and the webinar that I love. I love this part, and it's talking about contemplative practice. And part of our inner work is contemplative practice. So you might be asking, what are contemplative practice? I'm going to play this. It's about a 2-minute video on contemplative practice.
Techa, you may have to stop sharing and start sharing again and activate the audio because
Okay.
the audio is not coming through.
Okay.
Yeah. Should be something that's optimized for sound.
Mm.
While we're waiting on Techa to get that video up, just beautiful practice. And thank you so much. I mean, I already feel so much calmer. And some people are commenting that your voice is very soothing. You need to start recording some practices for people to practice to, because your voice is so calming.
Thank you, Todd. I tried to get that to play, but am unsure of how. But we can just keep rolling through.
Okay. All right. That's fine.
Okay.
And if you want to send me a link to that video, I can post it later.
Definitely, I will, so that everyone can have it. It's really a great video on what contemplative practice is. Okay. The wonders of technology. We love it. Okay, here we go. We're continuing through. And thank you all for your beautiful comments. Okay, hold on a second. Okay, we go to our next slide. Okay, this is the, I hope everyone can see it. We're back. The inner work of the teacher requires contemplative practice, and we talked about that, and I will more than gladly share that video so you can get a deeper look at what contemplative practice are. But this tree, I love this graphic. It's from See Mind, contemplativeminds.org. It's a great organization that helps educators foster contemplative practice in our work, and it involves us looking at community, stillness, movement, creative, art, nature, journaling. This tree is full. If you look at it, it's packed with different practices that we could do to help us with this inner work. You know, it might be yoga or walking in a labyrinth. That's something that I plan to do this summer, is to go to a labyrinth. I've never been to one, and I want to do it as part of my contemplative practice. So we talked earlier about loving kindness and gratitude, just sitting in silence and centering ourselves. So this is just a few of the contemplative practices that we can do. There's so many more that can help us with this inner work. Okay, hold on a second. Okay. The inner work involves looking at our inner lives as teachers. We talked about this throughout the presentation tonight, and it causes us to wake up to ourselves. So our day-to-day work that we do in schools, working with students and families, it can become so automatic that when we teach our subject matter, we can teach it blindfolded or with our hands behind our back. We know it. We know this. We're so skilled at what we do. But this inner work gives us the capacity to rediscover our joy, helps us heal from burnout and to thrive. So doing this inner work strengthens our resilience. Resilience is defined, this is a word too we've been hearing a lot of lately, the ability to thrive and not just survive. It's how we deal with adversity by drawing on our inner resources so that we can emerge from a tough time stronger and better equipped to deal with setbacks and challenges. And we know throughout our work and our lives as teachers, we have a lot of setbacks and we may have some challenges, but the inner work helps us to be resilient. A resilient person just doesn't muscle our way through or suffer through the silence and silent moments or alone. And those tough times, we're not alone. When we're resilient, those experiences help us to express a wide range of emotions and intentionally takes a number of actions to get through that moment. So ask ourselves, in what ways can we be more resilient? Before you tell yourself what you intend to do with your life, listen for what it intends to do with you. Before you tell your life what truths and values you have decided to live up to, let your life tell you what truths you embody, what values you represent. So part of that resilience is telling yourself what you intend to do with your life, but also listening to what your life wants to do with you. So let's look at a few more slides. We're getting close to the end of this webinar. I've enjoyed this so much, and I hope you have too. The inner work of the teacher asks us this question: what individual factors might support teacher resilience? So we have to get to know ourselves, learn more about ourselves. For example, learn what truly makes us happy and what we value in life. So let yourself have all the feelings, feel all the feels. It's important to remember that you're a human being who can experience a wide range of emotions. The inner work of resilient educators, what is that? A resilient educator reflects, a resilient educator sets boundaries, a resilient educator is clear on what matters most. All these are important. These are the three top that I picked for resilience. And we know that setting healthy boundaries is important. So think of boundaries as a life enhancing system of how you say yes and no so that you can grow and create the environment and relationships that enable you to do so with confidence and joy. Healthy boundaries are part of that inner work. So you ask yourself, what kind of boundaries do you set? And when you set those boundaries, do you stand firm in them? This is a resilience tip. We can take actions that are aligned to our core. When we take those actions, we feel more confident, competent, and able. We build resilience. Beautiful quote here. When we learn how to become resilient, we learn how to embrace the beautifully broad spectrum of the human experience. The inner work of the teacher. This picture is worth 1,000 words. It's beautiful. I love it. And it just shows how we may be alone in this work, but we're not alone. And our resilience and everything we bring to this inner work is an ongoing journey. It's a process. It's something that we commit our lives to doing so that we can do the work needed for others, that work before the work. So, a few words for us to remember tonight as we think about this inner work of the teacher. Words I'd like us to remember are inner work, the work before the work, our capacity, being open, holding space, retreats, reflection, thriving, healthy boundaries, resilience, relationships, and contemplative practices. This slide has a few resources. You may want to take a shot of it. Todd could probably also share some of the resources if you're interested. Contemplative Mind is cmind.org. There's an organization that I came across called Bright, Building Resilience in Teacher Education. It's an online program. The Center for Courage and Renewal in Greenville, there's a website there. Omega Institute, where I got my training, it's in Rhinebeck, New York. Kripalu is in Massachusetts. The Art of Living is a center that I plan to attend this summer. They have silent retreats. They're like 3 days in total silence. I've never done a silent retreat. I want to do one. So this is all a part of it. This is all how we cultivate that inner work. And there's so many resources and there's so many places and people are finding out more and learning more. You can start with these, or if you have some of your own, you can share them with your colleagues. And it's so much of a benefit to have resources that we can tap to help us with this inner work. This is a beautiful picture of indigo, one of Todd and I's favorite places. Spending time with nature is part of this inner work as well. And just being outside and just listening to the sounds around us allow us to connect to ourselves in deeper and greater ways. And we know that we're a part of nature and nature is a part of us. Omega Institute, and this is a picture of Kripalu. Beautiful spaces to help us with our inner work. And this is our final quote from the beautiful Parker J. Palmer. He says, "Before I can tell my life what I want to do with it, I must listen to my life telling me who I am." So, one more before we go. The inner work of the teacher, we like timelines as teachers. We can start with our practices. Just carve out a week or a few days where we can start. We have to start somewhere. And we asked ourselves a lot of questions tonight. We can start day one by asking ourselves questions or jotting down those questions we did and revisiting those and journaling about them. Like, who we are, what brought us to this work. Do we still have our spark, our fire, for teaching and the work that we do? Day 2, we can explore contemplative practices, set healthy boundaries, and research retreats. That's the fun part, places that we could go and help us cultivate and foster this inner work. And as we do the work, we always practice self-compassion, and this inner work gives us that time that we need to reflect. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoy tonight, and I want to thank Todd for inviting me to share. I apologize for the little technical glitch. I had that beautiful video, but you'll get it. And reach out to me if you have any questions or you want a workshop at your school or me to present. I'm available, and I want to just continue doing this work. I love this work so much, so passionate about it, and it's healing work, and it's part of my spiritual practice as a teacher. And I want to thank the SCEA for having me tonight. Thank you, Todd. I'll stop the share.
All right, you're welcome, more than welcome. Thank you so much, Techa. That was just wonderful. I mean, like, I'll be honest with you, when we started tonight, I was a little bit stressed out, and right now I feel just totally recalibrated. The calmness and your voice, and then the practice that we did together really helped me recenter, which is something that we have to constantly do. It's not like for most of us anyway, we don't get to that point where we're centered and then we stay there. We have to keep actively working to come back there. And for you to remind me of that really was touching and made a huge difference in the way I feel right now. So thank you. And Techa mentioned the retreat, and I want to just share for those of you who are still watching. Techa went on a retreat with us a few years ago, and she mentioned Indigo Retreat Center. That's in Old Fort, North Carolina, which is about 30 to 40 miles east of Asheville. It's in the Pisgah National Forest. It's not hard to get to. You don't need four-wheel drive, but it is a beautiful space. Curtis Creek runs right down through the property. It's a nice, neat, beautiful place. They have a nice studio for us to practice. 2 beautiful kitchen areas, and we have availability for a total of 10 people to go on this retreat. And we already have 4 of those spots just this week are taken. So there's 6 spots left as of at least a few hours ago. And it's $99 for members of the SCEA. It's $149 for non-members. That includes 2 nights of accommodations in one of the cabins. It also includes a book. We're going to purchase Dr. Tish Jennings' Mindfulness for Educators. All the trainings. We're going to bring in a yoga instructor who's going to do 2 gentle yoga sessions. So don't worry if you've never done yoga. We're not going to twist you around in a pretzel and make you uncomfortable. It's very calming, gentle yoga. And then it also includes coffee, tea, and snacks. The only thing you'll need to do is bring your own food, and there's fridges and places for you to cook, and you just bring your own food, and that way it keeps our costs down. And also, if anybody has any particular individual needs in terms of like gluten-free or vegan or whatever, they can just bring what they want instead of having to adapt to and pay for something that they're not going to eat. So anyway, so that's coming up. You can find out information. I pinned that comment tonight. You can read more about that at the pin. Just click the link in the pinned comment. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me. We'd love to have you to go deeper in the type of practices that Techa's mentioning. And Techa, do you have any final things that you'd like to share before we sign off?
No, I'm just energized and so grateful that I could have this time to bring this webinar to everyone that's joining from across South Carolina, even in other states they may be joining us. The inner work of the teacher is ongoing. It's something that we do every single day, and we have to work at it and practice and learn so much about who we are and what we bring to our work. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And for anybody who's watching, if you're not a part of our movement, we encourage you to just check out jointhescea.org. That's jointhescea.org. Check it out. I think between now and I can't remember the ending month, but right now I think you can join at no cost. We'd love to have you as a member to support this kind of work and for us to support you. So like, just as an example, if you want to go on the retreat, you can save $50 just by joining tonight. So, join the SCEA.org. And we'd love to have everybody as a part of our movement, because we are trying to build the type of school systems that our educators and their students deserve, which is one where we're given that space to know ourselves and to be compassionate and to not be so frazzled and obsessed with test scores, but to actually have space to be humans. And Techa, you are such a light, and thank you for your light. All right.
Thank you, John.
Have a wonderful night.